Okay, good morning. I want to take a moment to talk about the word debemus, specifically the sentence quid. Let me start again. Quid debemus cogitare. And I think in Latin it makes sense. What ought we, debemus, to think? And it is quite clear that this is a complementary infinitive. The problem comes into play when we do it in English, because English has at least two different ways to handle this sentence. Or in particular, or more generally, English has two different ways to handle obligation or necessity. I can say, we ought to think, or I can say, we should think. Okay? Now, both of these are acceptable in English. The problem is only one of them is acceptable in Latin. In other words, Latin has to use this one here, and they use the word ought. Lots of times in English, certainly American English, we don't talk that way because, and especially when you make it a question, what ought we to think? I mean, that is just not how we speak. What ought we to think? No, we say, what should we think? And that makes it sound a little different. And it's a lot harder to go from what should we think, because that does not contain the Latin. In other words, let me write, what should we think? When I turn this into a question, what should we think? Well, here you have the what. Good. I can put the word what down. I can put the word we think. Great. Then what do we do with should in Latin? I don't know. Because this is not a Latin construction. We have to remember, we are translating ideas and not words. And the way we translate this idea of obligation or necessity into Latin is we use this construction here, the complementary infinitive, despite the fact that it looks funny in this case here. I hope that makes sense. Now let me go on just a second, just a bit. Because in English, my goodness, you got me thinking. I don't know what this should business is. For example, let's do I ought to clean the stove. Great. I need to clean the stove. Now these are both two sentences in English that indicate obligation or necessity and maintain that complementary infinitive that Latin uses. I should clean the stove. And let me reiterate, just to go back to the other screen, Latin does not have a word for should in the way that we do. Latin's only possibilities are this one and this one, but not this one. Despite the fact that in all three, you know, they're fine English sentences. My question, my complete sidetrack is, are these three equivalent in English? I honestly don't have any idea. In this sense they are, but is there a difference between I need to renew my driver's license versus I should renew, or I ought to renew my driver's license? I think there is a little bit of difference there, because in renewing your driver's license, you have a need to do that. I don't really need to clean the stove. The evidence is there. But I ought to, I should, I need to. So I think sometimes in English, we use need to be ought, but sometimes need means need. It's bizarre, isn't it? Can you imagine? How would you teach this? How would you go the opposite? How would you teach this to someone in Latin, to a Roman learning English? I don't know. That would be tough. So again, this very specific screen here was a sidetrack, a side note. I do want to reiterate, though, this business here. Quid debemus cogitare. We have two ways to do that. What should we think and what ought we to think? What ought we to think, sorry. I think the should is more natural in English. It doesn't happen in Latin, which is why you have to do this little conversion. Hey, you know what it's like? It's, well, I don't need it. Even more sidetrack, it's like trying to find the common denominator in math. You know, 2/7 plus 1/3 is you've got to do some mental math before you can add those. You've got to convert the 2/7, like 6 21s plus 3 7 7 20. There you go. Yeah, you've got to do this mental math to get them the same before you actually translate. And I would argue it's the same thing with should in English. Should doesn't exist in Latin, but it's a fine construction in English. And it obviously causes confusion, understandably so. On the one hand, I've raised more questions, perhaps, than you thought you knew you had. But on the other hand, I hope I have clarified this quid debemus cogitare and why you still have to use the complementary infinitive, even though the English does not. Have a great day.